The sound of hooves pounding against sun-baked earth was the only warning Theresa Lawson had before her horse reared up, spooked by a rattlesnake coiled near the trail. She hit the ground hard, rolling down a sandy embankment until she plunged waist-deep into what looked like ordinary wet sand. But within seconds, she realized her terrible mistake. The more she struggled, the deeper she sank into the quicksand, and panic seized her chest as the viscous mixture pulled her down with relentless determination. "Help!" she screamed, her voice cracking with terror as the sand reached her ribs. "Somebody help me!" The April sun beat down mercilessly on the Kansas plains in 1878, and Theresa knew she was miles from Linden, the small town she had left that morning to deliver medical supplies to a neighboring ranch. Her horse had already bolted, and the chances of anyone passing by this remote creek bed seemed impossibly slim. She forced herself to stop thrashing, remembering something her father had once told her about quicksand, but her heart hammered so loudly she could barely think straight. Then she heard it, another horse, approaching fast. "Hold still." A deep voice commanded, and Theresa looked up to see a man dismounting from a paint horse with fluid grace. He was tall, with dark hair that hung past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved with purpose, grabbing his lasso and forming a loop as he approached the edge of the quicksand pool. "I cannot hold still much longer," Theresa gasped, feeling the sand creeping up toward her chest. "It is pulling me down." "Listen to me," the stranger said, his voice steady and calm despite the urgency of the situation. "You need to lean back, spread your weight. When I throw this rope, grab it with both hands and do not let go no matter what. Understand?" Theresa nodded, tears streaming down her dusty cheeks. The man's rope sailed through the air, and she caught it on the first try, gripping it so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Good," he said, already wrapping the other end around his saddle horn. "Now lean back like you are floating in water. Trust me." She did as he instructed, feeling the sand's grip shift slightly as she changed position. The man began to pull, his muscles straining as he worked hand over hand on the rope while his horse backed up slowly. The quicksand made obscene sucking sounds as it fought to keep its prize, but inch by agonizing inch, Theresa felt herself being dragged toward solid ground. When she was close enough, the stranger waded into the shallower edge of the quicksand pool, his boots sinking into the muck as he reached for her. His hand closed around her wrist, warm and strong, and he pulled her the final few feet to safety. They collapsed together on the bank, both breathing hard, and Theresa realized she was still gripping his hand with desperate intensity. "You are safe now," he said gently, not pulling away. "You can let go." But Theresa did not let go. She held onto his hand like it was the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to swallow her whole. And when she looked into his gray eyes, something passed between them that had nothing to do with rescue and everything to do with recognition. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." "Isaac Donovan," he said, finally sitting up but still not withdrawing his hand from hers. "And you are welcome, though I have to say that was the worst place to take a swim I have ever seen." Despite everything, Theresa laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that broke the tension. "Theresa Lawson. My horse got spooked, and I went tumbling down before I knew what was happening." "That rattlesnake probably saved your life in the long run," Isaac said, helping her to her feet though her legs felt like jelly. "This whole area is riddled with quicksand pools fed by underground springs. If your horse had wandered into one of them with you on its back, you both would have gone under." Theresa shuddered at the thought, and suddenly her knees gave out. Isaac caught her before she hit the ground, one arm around her waist, and for a moment they stood there, his hand still in hers, his other arm supporting her weight. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her shoulder, and something about his presence made her feel safer than she had in months. "Easy," he murmured. "The shock is setting in. We need to get you somewhere you can rest and get cleaned up. Where were you headed?" "The Morrison Ranch," Theresa said, her teeth starting to chatter despite the heat. "They have a sick child, and I am bringing medicine from Dr. Harrison in Linden." Isaac's eyebrows rose. "You are the doctor's assistant everyone has been talking about, the one who came from Boston last fall." "I suppose I am," Theresa admitted. "Though right now I feel more like a fool who should have stayed in the city where the ground does not try to eat you." "The ground here takes some getting used to," Isaac agreed, his lips quirking in what might have been a smile. "But it has its compensations." "Come on, my horse can carry us both to the Morrison place. It is only about 3 miles from here." He finally released her hand so he could retrieve his rope and check his horse, but Theresa felt the loss of contact like a physical ache. She watched as he efficiently coiled the lasso and secured it to his saddle, noting the way he moved with the unconscious grace of someone who had spent his entire life on horseback. His clothes marked him as a working cowboy, worn denim trousers and a faded blue shirt, but there was something about him that suggested he was more than just a ranch hand. When he returned to help her mount, Theresa realized she was still covered head to toe in drying quicksand. "I am going to ruin your saddle," she protested. "Leather cleans," Isaac said simply, and before she could argue further, he lifted her onto the horse with easy strength. He swung up behind her, one arm coming around her waist to hold her steady, and Theresa felt her breath catch at the intimacy of the position. "Hold on," he said quietly, and she did, placing her hands over his arm as they started moving. She could feel the warmth of his body all along her back, solid and reassuring, and for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt like maybe the West was not such a hostile place after all. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves and the constant prairie wind whistling through the grass. Theresa found herself leaning back against Isaac's chest, too exhausted and overwhelmed to maintain any pretense of proper distance. He did not seem to mind, his arm tightening slightly to keep her secure. "How did you happen to be passing by?" Theresa finally asked. "That area seemed fairly remote." "I was tracking a couple of stray cattle from the ranch where I work," Isaac explained. "The Lazy D, about 5 miles west of Linden, saw your horse running without a rider and figured something had gone wrong. Followed your tracks back to the creek bed." "The Lazy D," Theresa twisted slightly to look at him, recognizing the name. "That is William Dawson's place. I treated his wife for pneumonia 2 months ago." "That is the one. Mr. Dawson is a good man to work for," Isaac said. "Been there about 6 months now since I came up from Texas." "What brought you north?" Theresa asked, curious despite her exhaustion. There was something about this man that made her want to know everything about him, an unusual feeling for someone who had always prided herself on her professional detachment. Isaac was quiet for a moment, and Theresa wondered if she had overstepped. "Long story," he finally said. "Maybe I will tell you sometime when you are not covered in quicksand and shaking like a leaf." "I am not shaking," Theresa protested, but even as she spoke, she realized she was trembling, the aftermath of fear and adrenaline catching up with her. "Yes, you are," Isaac said gently. "It is normal after something like that. You came within minutes of drowning in sand. Most people would be a lot worse off. In Boston, the worst thing I had to worry about was pickpockets and the occasional runaway carriage," Theresa said, a note of frustration creeping into her voice. "Out here, the land itself seems determined to kill you." "The West is not for everyone," Isaac acknowledged, "but it gets in your blood if you give it a chance." There is a freedom here you cannot find anywhere else, a sense that you can be whoever you want to be without the weight of the past holding you down. There was something in his tone that made Theresa wonder what past he was trying to escape, but before she could ask, the Morrison Ranch came into view. It was a modest spread, a simple wooden house with a barn and a few outbuildings, but Theresa had never been so glad to see civilization in her life. Martha Morrison came rushing out as soon as she spotted them, her face creased with worry. "Miss Lawson, we have been so concerned. Your horse showed up here an hour ago without you, and we were about to send men out searching. I had a mishap with some quicksand," Theresa explained as Isaac helped her down from the horse. Her legs were steadier now, but she was intensely aware of the loss of his supporting arm. "Mr. Donovan here pulled me out just in time." Martha's eyes widened as she took in Theresa's sand-caked appearance. "Lord have mercy, you poor thing. Come inside right away and get cleaned up. We have water heating on the stove." She turned to Isaac with a grateful smile. "Mr. Donovan, you must stay for supper. It is the least we can do." "I appreciate the offer, madam, but I should get back," Isaac said, though his eyes kept drifting to Theresa. "Still have those cattle to find." "The cattle can wait until tomorrow," a male voice called from the barn, and Thomas Morrison emerged, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face. "Martha is right. You saved Miss Lawson's life, and we owe you a debt. Besides, it will be dark in a few hours, and you would have to ride past that quicksand area again. Better to wait until morning when you can see what you are doing." Isaac hesitated, and Theresa found herself hoping he would agree. The thought of him riding off and possibly never seeing him again made her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with her recent ordeal. "Please stay," she heard herself say, the words coming out before she could stop them. "I would like to thank you properly, and I cannot do that while I am covered in half the creek bed." Something flickered in Isaac's gray eyes, and he nodded slowly. "All right, thank you for the hospitality." Martha bustled Theresa into the house, chattering about how frightening it must have been and how lucky she was that Isaac had come along when he did. The Morrisons' daughter, a pale girl of about 8 named Emily, watched from a chair by the fire, wrapped in blankets despite the warmth of the day. "How is she?" Theresa asked quietly as Martha led her to a small room where a basin and pitcher of warm water waited. "The fever broke this morning, thank God," Martha said, relief evident in her voice. "But she is still weak as a kitten. I was afraid when your horse showed up without you that we would not get the medicine the doctor sent." "It should be in my saddlebag, if it is still attached to my horse," Theresa said, suddenly worried. "I was carrying laudanum and willow bark tea." "We have your saddlebag safe," Martha assured her. "Now you get cleaned up, and I will bring you some clean clothes. You are about the same size as my sister, and she left some things here the last time she visited." Alone in the small room, Theresa stripped off her ruined clothes and began washing the sand from her skin and hair. The water in the basin turned muddy brown, and she had to refill it 3 times before she felt clean again. As she scrubbed, she kept thinking about Isaac's hands pulling her from the quicksand, the strength in his grip, the calm certainty in his voice that had kept her from panicking completely. She had never believed in love at first sight. Her mother had always said such notions were foolish romanticism, that real affection grew slowly from shared values and mutual respect. But standing there in her undergarments, her wet hair dripping down her back, Theresa could not deny the pull she felt toward the man who had saved her life. It was more than gratitude, though she was certainly grateful. It was recognition, as if some part of her soul had known him long before their hands first touched. Martha returned with a simple calico dress in soft blue, along with fresh undergarments and stockings. "These should fit you well enough," she said, then paused, studying Theresa's face with knowing eyes. "That Isaac Donovan is a good man from what folks say. Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but fair and honest in his dealings." Theresa felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I barely know him, Mrs. Morrison." "Sometimes that is all it takes," Martha said with a gentle smile. "One look, one moment, and your whole life changes direction. That is how it was with Thomas and me. I knew the first time I saw him that he was the one, even though my father had other ideas about who I should marry." She patted Theresa's hand. "Get dressed and come out when you are ready. I will make sure Mr. Donovan does not run off before you have a chance to talk to him properly." After Martha left, Theresa dressed slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened the buttons on the borrowed dress. Through the small window, she could see Isaac talking with Thomas near the barn, his hat pushed back on his head, his profile silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. Even from this distance, she could see the easy confidence in his posture, the way he listened intently when Thomas spoke. When she finally emerged from the room, her hair braided and pinned up, she found Emily sitting at the table while Isaac entertained her with a story about a time he had encountered a skunk in Texas. The little girl was giggling, more animated than Theresa had ever seen her, and Isaac was grinning in a way that transformed his serious face into something approaching boyish. He looked up when Theresa entered, and his grin faded into something softer, more intense. "You clean up well," he said, then seemed to realize how that sounded and added quickly, "I mean, you look much better without the sand." "I should hope so," Theresa said, unable to keep from smiling. "Though I am told quicksand is all the fashion in Boston these days." Emily giggled again, and Martha beamed at them from where she was stirring something on the stove. "Sit down, both of you. Supper will be ready shortly, and Thomas is washing up." The meal was simple but hearty, beef stew with fresh bread and butter. Theresa found herself seated across from Isaac, and she caught him watching her several times throughout dinner. Each time their eyes met, she felt that same jolt of connection, as if an invisible thread was being woven between them with every shared glance. "Miss Lawson," Thomas said, breaking into her thoughts, "now that Emily is on the mend, when do you expect to return to Linden?" "Tomorrow morning, I suppose," Theresa said, though the prospect of leaving suddenly felt less appealing than it had that morning. "I need to report back to Dr. Harrison about Emily's condition, and I have other patients to check on." "I could ride with you," Isaac offered, the words coming out almost reluctantly, as if he was fighting against some internal debate. "Make sure you do not have any more encounters with quicksand. Besides, I need to swing by Linden to pick up supplies for the ranch." "That would be very kind of you," Theresa said, her heart lifting at the prospect of more time in his company. "Though I promise to be more careful about where I point my horse." After dinner, Martha insisted on giving Theresa the guest room while Isaac would sleep in the barn, a perfectly respectable arrangement that still made Theresa's pulse quicken at the thought of him being so close by. The family retired early, exhausted by the day's excitement, but Theresa found herself too restless to sleep. She slipped outside into the cool evening air, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders as she walked toward the corral where the horses dozed. The moon was nearly full, bathing the prairie in silver light, and the stars seemed impossibly bright after Boston's gas-lit streets. "Cannot sleep either." Theresa jumped slightly, then saw Isaac leaning against the corral fence, his face half in shadow. "I thought you would be in the barn," she said, moving to stand beside him. "Too many thoughts running through my head," Isaac admitted. "Figured I would check on the horses and give my mind a chance to settle." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Theresa said quietly, I never properly thanked you. Not really. You risked your own life going into that quicksand to pull me out. If you had lost your footing, we both could have died. I was not going to let that happen, Isaac said simply. When I saw you there, struggling, so scared. He trailed off, shaking his head. I just knew I had to get you out. There was not really any other choice. There is always a choice, Theresa said. You could have left me there, gone for help, but you did not hesitate. Isaac turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight his eyes looked almost silver. Theresa, he said, using her first name for the first time, and the sound of it on his lips made her shiver. From the moment I saw your face, even covered in sand and terrified, something happened. I cannot explain it. It was like finding something I did not even know I had been looking for. Theresa's breath caught. I felt it too, she whispered. When you grabbed my hand and pulled me out, I did not want to let go. I still do not want to let go. Isaac reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he cupped her cheek with his hand. His palm was warm and rough with calluses, and Theresa leaned into the touch. This is crazy, he murmured. I have known you for less than a day. I know, Theresa said, placing her hand over his. But that does not make it any less real, does it? No, Isaac agreed, and then he was kissing her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms coming up around his neck. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, two souls recognizing each other across the vast prairie night. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I do not want this to be just one night, he said hoarsely. I want to see you again. I want to know everything about you. Then we will make that happen, Theresa said firmly. Linden is not so far from the Lazy D Ranch. We can find ways to see each other. Your Dr. Harrison might not approve of you keeping company with a cowboy, Isaac warned. And I do not have much to offer you. I am not a wealthy man, Theresa. Everything I own fits in a saddle bag. Theresa pulled back enough to look him in the eye. I did not come west looking for wealth, Isaac. I came because I wanted to make a difference to help people who needed it. And maybe, she added softly, I was also running from something just like you. Isaac's expression grew serious. What were you running from? An engagement, Theresa admitted. To a man my parents chose, someone suitable and respectable and completely wrong for me. He wanted a decorative wife who would host dinner parties and produce heirs, not someone who wanted to study medicine and help the sick. When Dr. Harrison offered me a position as his assistant, I took it and never looked back. Do you regret it? Isaac asked. Not for a second, Theresa said. And especially not today. If I had stayed in Boston, I never would have met you. Isaac smiled, a real smile that lit up his whole face. If we are sharing secrets, I suppose I should tell you mine. I am not just a cowboy, though that is what I am now. I used to be a Texas Ranger. Theresa's eyes widened. What made you leave? A mission gone wrong, Isaac said heavily. Men under my command who died because I made a bad call. I could not stay after that, could not face their families knowing I was responsible. So I drifted north, ended up here, and tried to start over as someone new. You cannot outrun guilt, Theresa said gently. Believe me, I have tried to outrun my own share of it. But that does not mean you do not deserve happiness, Isaac, or another chance. Maybe you are my second chance, Isaac said, pulling her close again. Maybe we both needed to end up in the middle of Kansas, in this specific place at this specific time, so we could find each other. They stood there under the stars for a long time, talking quietly about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Theresa learned that Isaac had grown up on a ranch in East Texas, the youngest of 5 brothers, and had joined the Rangers at 18 because he wanted to make a difference. He learned that she had always been fascinated by medicine, but that women were not allowed to attend medical school. So she had studied everything she could on her own and convinced Dr. Harrison to take her on, despite the scandal it caused. When the moon was high overhead, they finally pulled apart reluctantly. "I should let you get some rest," Isaac said. "Tomorrow will be a long ride back to Linden." "Will you really come with me?" Theresa asked, needing the reassurance. "Wild horses could not keep me away," Isaac promised. "Though I would prefer to avoid any more quicksand." Theresa laughed softly and stood on her toes to kiss him one more time. "Thank you, Isaac, for everything." "Thank you for not letting go of my hand," he said, "even when you could have." She slipped back into the house and into bed, but sleep eluded her for hours as she replayed every moment of the day, from the terror of sinking into the quicksand to the joy of Isaac's kiss. She had come west seeking purpose and independence, never expecting to find love. But here it was, fierce and unexpected, and she was not about to let it slip through her fingers. Morning came too soon, and yet not soon enough. Theresa helped Martha with breakfast while Isaac saddled both horses, her own mount having been recovered and calmed overnight. Emily was bright-eyed at the table, the medicine having worked its magic, and she hugged Theresa goodbye with surprising strength. "Will you come visit us again?" the little girl asked. "Of course," Theresa promised. "And next time I will avoid the quicksand." The ride to Linden took most of the morning, and Theresa was intensely aware of Isaac riding beside her the entire way. They talked easily, discovering shared tastes in books and music, debating the future of the West now that the railroad was pushing further into Kansas territory. But beneath the easy conversation, there was an undercurrent of something deeper, an awareness of each other that made even the simplest exchange feel charged with meaning. As they approached Linden, a dusty town of perhaps 500 souls clustered around a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, Theresa felt her contentment begin to fade. Real life was waiting for her here, with all its responsibilities and expectations, and she did not know how a relationship with Isaac would fit into that reality. "What is wrong?" Isaac asked, reading her expression with unsettling accuracy. "I am just thinking about how to explain all this to Dr. Harrison," Theresa admitted. "He has been good to me, given me opportunities most women never get, but he is also very protective. I do not think he will approve of me riding off into the sunset with a cowboy I just met." "Then we will have to convince him I am trustworthy," Isaac said simply. "I am not afraid of meeting the good doctor, Theresa, and I am not going to hide how I feel about you just because some people might disapprove." His certainty bolstered her courage as they rode down Main Street, drawing curious looks from townspeople who knew Theresa by sight. She could practically hear the gossip starting already, the whispers about the doctor's assistant returning with a strange man, but she held her head high and pretended not to notice. Dr. Harrison's office was in a small building near the center of town, marked by a painted sign that read, "Harrison Medical Practice." The doctor himself was in his mid-50s, with gray hair and shrewd blue eyes that took in Isaac with one comprehensive glance as they entered. "Miss Lawson," he said, relief evident in his voice. "When your horse came back to the Morrison Ranch without you, I feared the worst. Thomas Morrison sent word this morning that you had been rescued from quicksand by a stranger." His gaze sharpened on Isaac. "I assume this is the stranger in question. Dr. Harrison, this is Isaac Donovan," Theresa said formally. "He saved my life yesterday when my horse threw me and I fell into a quicksand pool near Copper Creek. Mr. Donovan, this is Dr. John Harrison, my employer and mentor." The two men shook hands, each taking the measure of the other. "I owe you a debt of gratitude, Mr. Donovan," Dr. Harrison said. "Miss Lawson is not only my finest assistant but has become like a daughter to me. I would hate to lose her to the hazards of this unforgiving land." "She was very brave," Isaac said. "Most people would have panicked and made things worse, but she stayed calm and followed instructions. Made my job a lot easier. Still, it took courage to go into that quicksand after her," the doctor said thoughtfully. "Not many men would have taken that risk for a stranger." "She was not a stranger for long," Isaac said quietly, and something in his tone made Dr. Harrison's eyebrows rise. Before the doctor could comment, Theresa jumped in with a report on Emily Morrison's condition and the effectiveness of the prescribed treatment. Dr. Harrison listened attentively, asking questions and making notes, but she could tell he was still watching Isaac from the corner of his eye. When the medical discussion was finished, Dr. Harrison turned to Isaac. "Mr. Donovan, I wonder if I might impose on you to help me move some supplies in the back room. These old bones are not what they used to be." It was clearly an excuse to get Isaac alone, and Theresa felt a flutter of nervousness as the two men disappeared into the back of the office. She busied herself organizing medical instruments, straining to hear their conversation, but catching only murmurs. When they emerged 15 minutes later, Dr. Harrison was actually smiling, and Isaac looked relieved. "Mr. Donovan has agreed to stop by the office whenever he comes to town," the doctor announced. "I have need of someone with a strong back for various tasks, and he seems fit for the job." Theresa looked between them, suspicious of this sudden arrangement. "Is that so?" "Indeed," Dr. Harrison said, his eyes twinkling. "And I have also extended an invitation for him to join us for Sunday dinner this week, so we can properly thank him for his heroism." "You will come, won't you, Mr. Donovan?" "I would be honored, sir," Isaac said, and when his eyes met Theresa's, she saw the warmth there and understood. Dr. Harrison was giving his blessing in his own subtle way. After Isaac left to pick up supplies for the Lazy D Ranch, Theresa turned to her mentor with questions in her eyes. "What did you say to him?" "I merely asked him about his intentions regarding you," Dr. Harrison said, sitting down at his desk with a sigh. "The way he looks at you, Theresa, is not the way a man looks at someone he just met, and the way you look at him is equally telling." Theresa felt her cheeks heat. "It happened so fast, doctor. I know it sounds insane, but when he pulled me from that quicksand, something changed. I cannot explain it." "You do not need to explain it to me," Dr. Harrison said gently. "I may be old, but I remember what it was like to fall in love with my Elizabeth. One dance at a church social, and I knew she was the one. We were married 3 months later and had 40 wonderful years together before the fever took her." His expression grew sad for a moment, then cleared. "Isaac Donovan seems like a good man, Theresa. A bit haunted, perhaps, but then, who among us is not carrying some burden from our past? If you care for him, do not let fear or propriety stand in your way." "Thank you," Theresa said, blinking back unexpected tears. "That means more to me than you know." The week that followed was one of the happiest of Theresa's life. She threw herself into her work with renewed energy, helping Dr. Harrison treat everything from broken bones to influenza, but her thoughts kept drifting to Isaac. He came to town twice that week, ostensibly to help move heavy crates in the medical office, but really to spend time with Theresa, stealing moments of conversation between patients and sharing meals at the small boarding house where she rented a room. On Sunday, Isaac arrived at Dr. Harrison's home wearing his best clothes, his hair freshly cut and his boots polished. Theresa answered the door in a green dress she had borrowed from the doctor's housekeeper, and the look on Isaac's face when he saw her made her feel beautiful in a way she never had before. Dinner was pleasant, the conversation flowing easily between the three of them. Dr. Harrison shared stories from his years practicing medicine on the frontier, and Isaac talked about his experiences working on various ranches across Texas and Kansas. Theresa watched them both, feeling a deep sense of contentment at how well they got along. After the meal, Dr. Harrison excused himself to his study, leaving Isaac and Theresa alone on the front porch as the sun set over Linden. Isaac reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that had become comfortingly familiar. "I have been thinking," he said slowly, "about the future, about us." Theresa's heart began to beat faster. "What about us?" "I want to court you properly," Isaac said. "I know we have not known each other long, but I am sure about this, Theresa. I am sure about you. I want everyone to know that you are my girl if you will have me." "Yes," Theresa said without hesitation. "Yes, I will have you, Isaac Donovan. I would be honored to be courted by you." He grinned and pulled her close, kissing her thoroughly despite the risk that someone might see them. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Isaac said, "I should warn you, I am not much for fancy words or romantic gestures. I am just a simple cowboy trying to make an honest living." "You pulled me from Quicksand and gave me a reason to believe in fate," Theresa said softly. "That is romantic enough for me." The next few months passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing affection. Isaac made the ride from the Lazy D Ranch to Linden at least twice a week, sometimes helping Dr. Harrison and sometimes simply appearing at the office to walk Theresa home. They attended church socials together, went on chaperone picnics, and gradually became a recognized couple in Linden's small social circle. Not everyone approved. Some of the town's more established matrons thought Theresa was throwing herself away on a drifter with no prospects. And there were whispers that a woman who worked in medicine had no business catching the eye of any respectable man. But Theresa had never cared much for other people's opinions, and Isaac cared even less. They built their relationship on honesty and shared values, talking for hours about everything from politics to poetry. In July, Isaac took Theresa to meet William Dawson and his wife at the Lazy D Ranch. The Dawsons had clearly been expecting the visit, and Mrs. Dawson fussed over Theresa like a proud mother, insisting she had known from the moment Isaac started acting distracted that he had fallen in love. "He is a good man, Mrs. Dawson told Theresa as they prepared lunch while the men discussed ranch business outside. "Hardworking, honest, kind to the animals. Mr. Dawson says he has never had a more reliable foreman." "Foreman," Theresa repeated, surprised. "I thought Isaac was just one of the hands, Mrs." Dawson looked equally surprised. "Did he not tell you? Mr. Dawson promoted him 3 months ago. Isaac runs the entire operation now, manages all the other cowboys, and handles the business side of things. He has a real head for it, apparently." Theresa felt a swell of pride mixed with curiosity about why Isaac had not mentioned this development. When she asked him about it later as they walked along the creek that ran through the Dawson property, he seemed almost embarrassed. "I did not want you to think I was boasting," he admitted. "Or that I told you I was just a regular cowboy to make myself seem more humble than I am. The truth is, I am still getting used to the responsibility. After what happened in Texas, I never thought I would be put in charge of anything again." "You are not that same person anymore," Theresa said firmly, stopping to face him. "And even if you were, one mistake does not define a whole life, Isaac. You have to forgive yourself eventually." "You make it sound so easy," Isaac said with a slight smile. "It is not easy," Theresa acknowledged. "But it is necessary. How can we build a future together if you are still trapped in the past?" The words hung in the air between them, and Isaac's expression grew serious. "A future together," he repeated. "Is that what you want, Theresa? Because I need to know if we are on the same page here. I am not the kind of man who does things halfway. When I commit to something, I commit completely. I want a future with you, Theresa said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I want everything with you, Isaac. Marriage, a home, a family, all of it. Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I have been carrying my grandmother's ring in my pocket for 2 weeks now, he confessed against her hair, trying to work up the courage to ask you properly. I wanted it to be perfect, wanted to have more to offer you than just my name and a foreman's wages. Theresa pulled back to look at him. Are you saying what I think you are saying? Isaac dropped to one knee right there in the grass beside the creek, pulling a small velvet pouch from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band set with a small but clear diamond, old-fashioned and beautiful. Theresa Lawson, you grabbed my hand in that quicksand, and I never want you to let go. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Theresa's face as she nodded. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he was standing again, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. They were married in late September in Lyndon's small church, with Dr. Harrison giving Theresa away and William Dawson standing up as Isaac's best man. Half the town turned out for the ceremony, curiosity and genuine affection mixing in equal measure. Theresa wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Dawson had helped her sew, and Isaac wore a new suit that he would probably never wear again. But he looked so handsome that Theresa could barely catch her breath. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation openly wept. Theresa felt like she was floating as they walked back down the aisle together, her hand firmly clasped in Isaac's, just as it had been that first day by the quicksand. The reception was held at the town hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted until well after dark. Theresa danced with her new husband, with Dr. Harrison, with William Dawson and half a dozen other men from town, but always her eyes sought out Isaac, and always he was watching her with an expression of wonder, as if he could not quite believe his luck. When they finally escaped to the small house on the edge of town that the Dawsons had helped them purchase as a wedding gift, Theresa kicked off her uncomfortable shoes and collapsed onto the sofa with a sigh of relief. Isaac sat beside her, pulling her feet into his lap and massaging them gently. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Donovan?" he asked with a grin. "Perfectly happy, Mr. Donovan," Theresa replied, loving the sound of her new name, "though I think my feet may never recover from all that dancing." "I will carry you everywhere if necessary," Isaac promised, his hands working their way up her calves in a way that made her shiver. "I made a vow today to take care of you in sickness and in health, and I intend to keep it." "I made the same vow," Theresa reminded him, sitting up so she could wrap her arms around his neck. "We take care of each other now. That is what marriage means." Isaac kissed her softly, then deeper, and Theresa felt heat building between them. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I loved you from the moment I pulled you out of that quicksand, covered in mud and scared out of your mind, but still so brave. I will love you until the day I die." "I love you too," Theresa whispered back. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Isaac Donovan. My second chance at life, in every way." They made love that night with a tenderness that gradually gave way to passion, learning each other's bodies with the same careful attention they had given to learning each other's hearts. Theresa fell asleep in Isaac's arms, feeling safer and more loved than she had ever felt in her life. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Theresa continued working with Dr. Harrison, though she scaled back her hours somewhat after discovering she was pregnant in the spring. Isaac threw himself into his work at the Lazy D, and his management proved so successful that the ranch expanded significantly, buying up 2 smaller neighboring properties. Theresa's pregnancy was difficult at times. She experienced severe morning sickness that lasted well into her 2nd trimester, and there were moments when she worried that her body was not strong enough to carry a child to term. But Isaac was there through all of it, holding her hair back when she was sick, rubbing her swollen feet, reading to her on the nights when she could not sleep. Dr. Harrison monitored her progress carefully, and as her due date approached in December, he expressed concern about her narrow hips and small frame. "I want you to prepare yourself," he told her gently. "Childbirth is dangerous under the best circumstances, and your first baby especially can be difficult. Isaac should be prepared as well." The conversation terrified Theresa, but when she told Isaac about it that night, he simply held her close and said, "You are the strongest person I know. You survived Quicksand, left everything you knew to start over in a new place, and deal with sick people every day without flinching. You can do this too, and I will be right there with you." His faith in her gave Theresa courage, and when her labor began on a snowy December evening, she tried to channel that courage. But the labor was long and agonizing, lasting through the night and into the next day. Dr. Harrison did everything he could, but there were moments when Theresa thought she might not survive, when the pain became so overwhelming that she wanted to give up. Through it all, Isaac never left her side. He held her hand, wiped her forehead with cool cloths, whispered encouragement in her ear. "Do not let go," he kept saying. "Remember how you held on to my hand in that quicksand. Hold on now, Theresa. Hold on for me, for our baby. Do not let go." Finally, after 18 hours of labor, their son was born. He came into the world screaming his displeasure, red-faced and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Dr. Harrison placed the baby in Theresa's arms, and she looked down at him through exhausted tears, unable to believe that she and Isaac had created this tiny miracle. "He is beautiful," Isaac said hoarsely, his own eyes wet as he touched his son's downy head. "He looks like you." "He has your nose," Theresa countered with a weak laugh. "Poor thing." They named him James after Isaac's father, and he became the center of their universe. Theresa cut back her work even further, only helping Dr. Harrison with emergencies, and Isaac arranged his schedule so he could spend more time at home. They were exhausted and overwhelmed and deliriously happy. James was 6 months old when William Dawson approached Isaac with a proposition. He was getting older, he explained, and wanted to retire from active ranch management. He offered to sell Isaac a stake in the Lazy D, making him a partner rather than just a foreman. "I cannot afford something like that," Isaac protested, but Dawson waved off his concerns. "We will work out a payment plan," he said. "You have earned this, Isaac. You have made this ranch more profitable than it has ever been, and I trust you to keep it running properly after I am gone. Besides, I would like to see you and Theresa have some security, especially now that you have a child." Isaac discussed it with Theresa that night, and she encouraged him to accept. "You have worked so hard," she said. "You deserve this opportunity." And think what it would mean for James, to grow up knowing his father owns part of a successful ranch. So Isaac became a partner in the Lazy D, and their financial situation improved dramatically. They were able to hire a woman from town to help with James, giving Theresa more flexibility to assist Dr. Harrison when needed. They expanded their small house, adding a 2nd bedroom and a proper medical office where Theresa could see patients who did not want to make the trip into town. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. James grew into a sturdy toddler with Isaac's gray eyes and Theresa's dark curls. Isaac's reputation as a fair and skilled ranch manager spread, and the Lazy D became known as one of the best operations in central Kansas. Theresa's medical practice flourished, and Dr. Harrison began talking about her taking over his practice entirely when he eventually retired. On their 5th anniversary, Isaac surprised Theresa with a trip back to the creek where he had pulled her from the quicksand. The area looked different now, safer, because Isaac had worked with some other ranchers to drain and fill in the dangerous quicksand pools. But they stood at the spot where it had happened, holding hands and remembering. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come along that day?" Isaac asked. "No," Theresa said firmly, "because you did come along, that is what matters. You saved my life and I grabbed your hand and never let go, and here we are." "Here we are," Isaac echoed, pulling her close. 5 years married, a beautiful son, another baby on the way. Theresa's eyes widened. "How did you know? You get this glow about you," Isaac said with a grin. "And you have been falling asleep right after supper for the past week. Was I right?" "You were right," Theresa admitted. "I was going to tell you tonight we should have another baby by spring." Isaac whooped with joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around just as he had when she accepted his proposal. "We are going to need a bigger house," he said when he finally set her down. Their daughter was born in April, an easier birth than James had been, and they named her Sarah after Theresa's mother. She had Isaac's serious expression even as a baby, studying the world with solemn gray eyes, but when she smiled, she lit up the entire room. James adored his baby sister, constantly wanting to help feed her or rock her cradle. At 4 years old, he was already showing signs of Isaac's steady temperament and Theresa's curiosity about the world. He followed his father around the ranch when allowed, learning about horses and cattle, but he also loved looking at Dr. Harrison's medical books and asking Theresa endless questions about how the body worked. "He is going to be whatever he wants to be," Isaac said proudly one evening as they watched James carefully examine a beetle he had found in the garden. "Smart as a whip, that boy." "He gets that from both of us," Theresa said, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "We make good children together, Isaac Donovan." "That we do," Isaac agreed, kissing the top of her head. "Think we should try for a third?" Theresa laughed. "Let me recover from this one first, and then we will see." But there would be a third child, a second son they named Thomas, born 2 years after Sarah. And then, 4 years later, twin girls that they named Catherine and Claire, much to Isaac's amused dismay at being outnumbered by females in his own household. Through all of it, through the sleepless nights and childhood illnesses, through droughts and hard winters, through the good years and the difficult ones, Isaac and Theresa held onto each other. Their love, forged in a moment of crisis and strengthened by years of partnership, became the foundation on which they built their entire life. Dr. Harrison retired when James was 10, leaving his practice to Theresa. She became the first female doctor in 3 counties, though technically she never had a medical degree. No one seemed to care about that detail. She had learned everything she needed from Dr. Harrison and from years of hands-on experience, and the people of Linden and the surrounding area trusted her completely. Isaac eventually bought out William Dawson's share of the Lazy D entirely, making him the sole owner of one of the largest ranches in Kansas. But success never changed him. He still worked alongside his ranch hands, still treated everyone with the same respect and fairness that had earned him his original promotion to foreman. Their children grew up surrounded by love and the wide open spaces of the Kansas prairie. James did eventually become a doctor, studying in Chicago before returning to Linden to practice with his mother. Sarah married a lawyer and moved to Topeka, but she visited frequently with her own children. Thomas took over the ranch operations, proving to have even more of a gift for it than his father. And the twins, Catherine and Claire, became teachers, opening the first real school in Linden and educating children from miles around. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Theresa stood once again at the place where they had met. The quicksand was long gone, filled in and reclaimed by prairie grass, but they both remembered exactly where it had been. 25 years, Theresa marveled, her hair now streaked with silver though her eyes were as bright as ever. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you were pulling me out of that mud. And you were holding on to my hand like you would never let go, Isaac added, his own hair now more gray than dark. Best decision I ever made going after you. Best decision I ever made holding on, Theresa countered. She turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. You have given me the most amazing life, Isaac. Sometimes I lie awake at night just feeling grateful that your path crossed mine that day. The gratitude goes both ways, Isaac said softly. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Theresa, maybe more. You gave me a reason to stop running from my past, to believe I deserved happiness again. You gave me a family, a purpose, a future worth living. They kissed there in the prairie grass, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that chance encounter. The wind whispered through the grass around them, carrying the scent of wildflowers and warm earth, and in the distance, they could see the homestead they had built together, solid and enduring. Come on, Theresa said, tugging on his hand. Our grandchildren are waiting for us at the house. James said his boys want to hear the story of how we met again. They have heard that story 100 times, Isaac protested, but he was smiling. And they will hear it 100 more, Theresa said firmly. Because it is a good story, it is our story. They walked back to the house hand in hand, just as they had done everything for the past 25 years. Inside, their children and grandchildren were gathered for the anniversary celebration, and the house rang with laughter and love. Isaac stood at the head of the long dining table they had bought when their family kept growing, looking around at all the faces, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. Can I have everyone's attention? He called out, and the room gradually quieted. I just want to say a few words before we eat this magnificent meal that my daughters seem to have prepared. With help from Sarah and Mother, Catherine called out, and everyone laughed. With help from Sarah and Theresa, Isaac amended. I want to talk about something that happened 25 years ago when I was riding across the prairie looking for lost cattle. I heard a scream, and when I went to investigate, I found a woman sinking in quicksand. The younger grandchildren leaned forward, even though most of them had heard this story before. There was something magical about it to them, the idea that their grandfather had been a hero who saved their grandmother's life. I threw her a rope and she caught it, Isaac continued. And when I pulled her to safety, she grabbed my hand and she did not let go. Not that day, not ever. She is still holding on even now, and I hope she never stops. Theresa's eyes filled with tears as the family erupted in applause. She rose from her seat and crossed to Isaac, and he pulled her into his arms, kissing her soundly despite the whistles and catcalls from their children. I will never let go, Theresa whispered against his lips. Not in this life or any other. Good, Isaac whispered back. Because I am not done with you yet, Mrs. Donovan. We still have years ahead of us, grandchildren to spoil and adventures to have. Adventures? Theresa raised an eyebrow. I think we have had enough adventures to last a lifetime. Maybe just small adventures then, Isaac conceded. Like teaching Thomas's boy to ride, or helping James with his medical practice, or traveling to Topeka to visit Sarah. Those sound like perfect adventures to me, Theresa agreed. The anniversary dinner was everything an anniversary dinner should be, full of good food and better company. Stories were told and retold, jokes were shared, and toasts were made to love and family and the prairie that had brought them all together. The children performed a song they had written especially for the occasion, and Isaac pretended his eyes were not wet as he listened to them sing about courage and quicksand and holding on. As the evening wound down and the grandchildren were tucked into various beds throughout the house, Isaac and Theresa slipped outside onto the porch. The night was warm and clear, stars blazing overhead in that particular way they did on the prairie, where there were no city lights to dim their glory. "You remember what you said to me that first night at the Morrison place?" Theresa asked, settling into the porch swing beside Isaac. "When we were standing by the corral." "I said a lot of things that night," Isaac replied, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Most of them probably foolish. You said it was like finding something you did not even know you had been looking for," Theresa reminded him. "I have been thinking about that lately. How sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never planned for, the ones that take you by surprise." "Like quicksand," Isaac suggested with a slight grin. Theresa swatted his arm playfully. "Like love, you impossible man. Like building a life with someone who understands you completely, who challenges you and supports you and makes you want to be better than you are." "You did all that for me," Isaac said seriously. "And more. You gave me 5 incredible children, a legacy I can be proud of, and a love that has sustained me through everything. I am not an eloquent man, Theresa, but I hope you know how much you mean to me." "I know," Theresa said simply, resting her head on his shoulder. "I have always known. Just like you have always known how much I love you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently in the swing and listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Inside the house, they could hear the murmur of their children's voices as they cleaned up from dinner, the occasional burst of laughter from one of the grandchildren who was resisting bedtime. "We did good, didn't we?" Isaac said quietly. "With all of this. The family, the life we built." "We did very good," Theresa agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was sinking in that quicksand, thinking I was going to die." "But you did not die," Isaac said firmly. "You held on, you fought, and you lived. And because of that, because you refused to give up, we have all of this." "Because you came along," Theresa corrected. "Because you were brave enough to risk your own life to save a stranger." "You were never really a stranger," Isaac said thoughtfully. "Even in that first moment, covered in mud and terrified, you felt familiar somehow. Like I had been waiting my whole life to find you, and there you were." Theresa lifted her head to kiss him softly. "Fate," she said, "or destiny, or whatever you want to call it. We were meant to find each other, Isaac. Everything that happened before that day, all the choices we made and the roads we traveled, they all led us to that exact moment by that quicksand pool. Then I am grateful for every mistake I ever made," Isaac said. "Every wrong turn and bad decision, because they all brought me to you." They stayed on the porch until the last light in the house went out and the prairie had settled into its deep nighttime hush. Then they went inside together, climbing the stairs to their bedroom hand in hand, just as they had done every night for 25 years. The years that followed brought their share of sorrows along with the joys. Dr. Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, and both Isaac and Theresa mourned the loss of the man who had brought them together and believed in their love from the beginning. William Dawson followed a few years later, and Isaac served as a pallbearer, honoring the man who had given him a second chance and helped him build a legacy. But there were more grandchildren born, 13 in all eventually, and then great-grandchildren began arriving. The house that had once seemed so large when it was just Isaac and Theresa and baby James became a gathering place for the entire extended family, especially on holidays and special occasions. Isaac's hair went completely white, and Theresa developed arthritis in her hands that made her medical work more difficult. But they aged gracefully together, still holding hands when they walked through town, still sharing private jokes and loving glances across crowded rooms. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole town of Linden turned out for a celebration in the town square. By then, the Donovan family had become one of the most respected in the county, known for their integrity, generosity, and devotion to the community. Isaac and Theresa sat in chairs of honor while speeches were made and gifts presented, and they smiled at each other through it all, remembering the young couple they had been 50 years earlier. 50 years! Isaac marveled that night when they were finally alone in their bedroom. His hands shook slightly as he helped Theresa unpin her hair, but his touch was still gentle. "Half a century with you, and it still does not feel like enough time." "We have been blessed," Theresa said, catching his hand and bringing it to her lips. "More blessed than most people ever are. We found each other, we built something beautiful, and we never let go." "Never," Isaac agreed, and there was a fierce determination in his voice despite his age. "Not until the end, Theresa. We hold on until the very end." Isaac passed away first, on a cold January morning when he was 78 years old. He had gone out to check on the horses, something he still insisted on doing every day despite his children's protests, and his heart simply gave out. Thomas found him in the barn, sitting peacefully on a hay bale as if he had just decided to take a rest. Theresa was devastated but not surprised. She had seen the signs, noticed how tired Isaac had been getting, how he would sometimes pause to catch his breath after simple tasks. She had known their time was running short, but knowing did not make the loss any easier. The funeral was one of the largest Linden had ever seen. Isaac had touched countless lives through his fairness, his kindness, and his quiet strength. But it was Theresa that people worried about most. How would she go on without the man who had been her partner for more than 50 years? For weeks after the funeral, Theresa moved through the house like a ghost, unable to settle, unable to find peace. She would reach for Isaac's hand in the middle of the night and find only empty space. She would turn to tell him something and remember that he was gone. The grief was crushing, threatening to pull her under just like that quicksand had so many years ago. But then, one morning, she woke up and remembered something Isaac had said to her when she was in labor with James, struggling and wanting to give up. "Hold on," he had said. "Do not let go." So she held on. She held on to her memories, her family, her purpose. She continued seeing patients until her hands would no longer cooperate. She spent time with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, sharing stories about Isaac and keeping his memory alive. She worked in the garden he had planted for her, tended the roses he had brought her every anniversary. Theresa lived for another 5 years after Isaac's death, and in that time she found a kind of peace. She missed him every single day, but she also felt his presence in everything around her. In the strong, kind faces of their sons. In the compassionate way their daughters treated everyone they met. In the ranch that still bore his mark in every well-maintained fence and carefully chosen breeding decision. On a warm April evening, as the Kansas prairie bloomed with wildflowers, Theresa died in her sleep at the age of 81. She was in the bedroom she had shared with Isaac, in the house they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. James was the one who found her, and he said later that she looked peaceful, even happy, as if she had finally found what she had been waiting for. On her bedside table was a worn photograph from their wedding day. Young Isaac and young Theresa looking at each other with such love and joy that it still had the power to bring tears to people's eyes. They buried Theresa next to Isaac in the Linden Cemetery, under a spreading oak tree with a view of the prairie they had both loved. The headstone was simple, just their names and dates, but below that were the words James had chosen. He pulled her from Quicksand. She grabbed his hand and never let go. The story of Isaac and Theresa Donovan became a legend in Linden, passed down through generations. Parents told their children about the cowboy who saved the doctor's assistant from quicksand, and how that one moment of bravery and that one choice to hold on had created a love story for the ages. Young couples would sometimes visit their graves, hoping some of that enduring love would bless their own relationships. The house Isaac and Theresa had built stayed in the family, passed down to Thomas, and then to his children. The Lazy D Ranch continued to thrive, managed by their descendants who tried to live up to the example Isaac had set. And the medical practice Theresa had built became a clinic that served the region for generations, a testament to her skill and dedication. In the end, what Isaac and Theresa had created together was more than just a family or a business or even a love story. It was a legacy of courage, compassion, and commitment. It was proof that sometimes the worst moments in life can lead to the best ones. That sometimes holding on when everything tells you to let go is exactly the right choice. And it all started with quicksand, a rope, and two people brave enough to hold onto each other and never let go.